On August 13, 1971, the most powerful men in American finance were secretly airlifted to a presidential retreat in the mountains of Maryland. Their phones were confiscated. Their families were told nothing. For the next 48 hours, they would dismantle the very foundation of global money. And by Monday morning, every single dollar on Earth would be fundamentally different. You were never supposed to understand what happened that weekend, because what happened that weekend is still reaching into your bank account right now. Today, every time you wonder why your paycheck buys less than it did last year, every time you watch housing prices climb beyond reason, every time you feel like the rules of money were written against you, they were, and they were written in 48 hours. Follow the money. To understand what was killed that weekend, you need to understand what existed before it. For most of modern history, money was tethered to something real: gold. Every dollar printed by the United States government was backed by a physical quantity of gold sitting in a vault. This wasn't symbolic. This was a hard mathematical limit on power. No president, no Congress, no central bank could simply create money from nothing, because every new dollar required gold to support it. This system was formalized in 1944 at a resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. It made the US dollar the backbone of the entire world economy. 44 nations agreed that their currencies would be pegged to the dollar, and the dollar would be pegged to gold at exactly $35 per ounce. The most important financial agreement in human history. And it came with a promise. Any foreign government holding US dollars could walk up to the gold window and exchange those dollars for real, physical gold. America gave its word, but promises and power have never coexisted for long. Here's the thing. The history books call what came next context. The financial records reveal it as motive. Throughout the 1960s, the United States was spending at a rate that would have terrified the architects of Bretton Woods. The Vietnam War was devouring billions. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs were reshaping domestic spending, and none of it was being paid for honestly. The government was printing dollars far beyond what the gold reserves could support. By 1971, the United States had approximately $10 billion in gold, but had issued foreign claims against that gold worth more than $40 billion. Read that again. America had made 4 times more promises than it could keep. And foreign nations started to notice. The first crack came from France. Charles de Gaulle, deeply suspicious of American financial dominance, began aggressively converting French dollar holdings into gold. He literally sent a warship to collect it. Other nations followed: Britain, Switzerland, Germany, all quietly lining up at the gold window, exchanging their paper for the only thing that couldn't be printed. Between 1959 and 1971, U.S. gold reserves dropped by more than half. The vault was emptying. The bluff was being called. The history books called it a currency crisis. The financial records tell a different story. Richard Nixon understood something that most citizens did not. If the gold window stayed open, America would be fully exposed. Every ounce that left the vault was proof. Proof the government had been spending money it didn't have, fighting wars it couldn't afford, making promises backed by metal that was walking out the door. The entire system was 45 days from visible collapse. So on that Friday the 13th in August, Nixon gathered 15 men at Camp David: Treasury Secretary John Connally, Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns, Economic Advisor Paul Volcker, who decades later would describe the weekend as the moment the world changed. They were told to leave their briefcases. They were told to tell no one. And they were given a single task: find a way to keep American power intact even though the gold was almost gone. And that's where it gets strange. What emerged from those 48 hours was presented to the American public on a Sunday evening, during a television address that preempted the most popular show in the country. Nixon called it temporary. He said he was suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold to protect American workers from international speculators. Temporary. That word was chosen very carefully, because what he actually did was permanent. He severed the last connection between money and anything real. From that moment forward, the dollar was backed by nothing but the authority of the government that printed it. Every empire that ever collapsed had one thing in common. The moment money became untethered from reality was the moment the clock started. Now here's the part they never taught you in school. Follow the money and ask the only question that matters. Who profited? Within 3 years of the Nixon shock, the price of gold went from $35 an ounce to nearly $200. Those who saw it coming, those who were in the room or connected to the room, had the greatest insider knowledge in economic history. They knew the dollar would fall. They knew gold would rise. They knew inflation was coming. And the financial elite repositioned themselves while ordinary Americans were told this was a temporary measure to protect them. Think about that for a second. The decade that followed was the most economically devastating for the American middle class since the Great Depression. Inflation surged above 12%. The purchasing power of savings destroyed. Wages stagnated against rising prices. The average American family watched their economic security evaporate, and they were told it was because of oil prices, because of foreign markets, because of forces beyond anyone's control. But the root cause was a decision made by 15 men in a mountain retreat over a single weekend. A decision to remove the one mechanism that prevented governments from printing unlimited money. And that mechanism has never been restored. Nixon's temporary measure is now 53 years old. Consider what has happened since. In 1971, the average American home cost $25,000. Today, it costs over $400,000. In 1971, a year of college tuition cost roughly $500. Today, it averages over $20,000. In 1971, the national debt was approximately $400 billion. Today, it exceeds $34 trillion. The dollar has lost more than 85% of its purchasing power since that Sunday night address. These are not coincidences. These are consequences. Direct, traceable, mathematical consequences of removing the gold standard. The system that replaced it gave governments something they had never had before, the unlimited ability to create money. And every government that has ever been given that ability has used it. Not sometimes, every single time. The spending increases, the debt grows, the money supply expands, and the purchasing power of every dollar already in circulation silently erodes. Here's the thing. It is the most elegant form of theft ever designed, because most people never see it happening. Your salary goes up 2%. Inflation runs at 3%. Year after year, you fall behind while being told you're moving forward. This is why the story of that weekend matters. Not because it's history, because it is happening to you right now. Every dollar you earn, every dollar you save, every dollar you will ever hold exists in a system that was fundamentally broken in 48 hours and never repaired. Today, governments around the world print money at rates that would have been unimaginable in 1971. Central banks debate digital currencies that could give them even more control over every transaction you make. Inflation returns with a ferocity that feels deeply familiar. So the question is no longer what happened at Camp David. The question is, what happens next? Because the pattern has never changed. Unlimited money creation leads to currency debasement. Currency debasement leads to economic instability. And economic instability leads to a transfer of wealth from those who earn it to those who control the system. If this changed how you see the money in your pocket, a like goes a long way toward helping more people find the stories that don't make it into textbooks. The 48 hours at Camp David didn't just change the dollar. They changed the rules of wealth for every generation that followed, including yours. And until you understand those rules, You're playing a game you were never meant to win. Subscribe, because the next time money moves in the shadows, you'll hear about it here first.